Hello and welcome, I'm Kara Scrivener, and welcome to August, my favorite month, I think. My birthday is September, so I always think, yeah, that's my favorite. But like, I don't know, there's something about August with the cooling, the lack, like, I feel so refreshed and wonderful each August, and I'm so excited for this one. I begin it in the best way. I started and watched the entirety of The Pursuit of Love, which had the brilliant, like, Lily James in it. I loved it so much, especially the first episode. It was like just downright brilliant. Like I literally spent most of it being like, oh my goodness, I love this, I love this, I love this. Like this is me. Not like this is me, because like I can't actually relate to like, I would never throw away my life for love, but like I just everything about it, the humor especially just worked so well for me. It's a period piece set in the 1940s, but it was also written in 1945 by this woman who her family were all kind of like scandalous women, and she kind of took a lot of that and combined it. So their father is like terrible and like awful and just doesn't believe in the education of women, but it's done in a really humorous, like satirical, biting way, even though obviously he's not a good man. And then we have Fanny, her cousin, who is the main character and narrator, and she has a much more. It's interesting because she begins, she's the educated one, she's the one who has a little bit more of the like worldly experience, where really our main character of Linda doesn't have any of that. She has none of the like experiences that Fanny does, but Fanny is much more shy and reserved. It was interesting because I did this right after finishing Mansfield Park, so I couldn't about think of that Fanny as well. And it's very interesting to see their dynamic and to see them like it definitely got hard in some of the later episodes, but I really, really loved their story, and it's one that I hope to rewatch and like show all of my friends because man, I loved it. And then today I read Wuthering Heights. I started this in I think 2017. There was like a very old notebook in here and I had written it, and this is rough. There's so much dogs and just like her like so I read Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and I liked it, even though it has a lot of like the writing can be clunky at times. This is clunkiest than clunkiest. So many dogs, so much like me and my roommate, I was like reading it and she was like, I have such a hard time like figuring out what the heck you're saying. And then like both of us are well read. Like we're not unread people. So like I just started reading moments and just being like, his vexatious phlegm. And the dogs came out from the recesses, like the Canaan center. Like it's all so dramatic. Like ridiculous and so long. Like I read lots of old books, but dang, Emily. I am continuing on with Vanity Fair. I began it at the end of last month. I was just in such a mood to read classic literature and to read like a story. And once I heard that it was governess and that it had some parallels to Jane Eyre, I was like, oh yes, I want this, I want this, I want this. So I'm having such a lovely time. It is much less character driven, but like it's funny. It's reminding me a lot of Anna Karenina, probably written about 10 years later, I think, 40s to 60s, somewhere in this. And yeah, I think I'm going to be reading a lot of classic literature and then turn around. I'm not going to read Eddie, but I'm in such a mood for that. So I've been reading Vanity Fair and it is so good. I am loving it so much. Wuthering Heights is starting to get better now that we're getting into like more of the back flashbacks and the flashbacks within the flashbacks. It's pretty good. And I have a new favorite show. August, I told you August is good, and it's already had two favorite new shows. So this is Feel Good, and this is written, starred, and produced by Mae Martin, and just like living and dealing with addiction and dealing with relationships. I don't know. It doesn't really have a plot, and it like feels really authentic. I love stories that feel just like, you're living life. It's really funny in like an everyday way. It's really emotional in an everyday way. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem over dramatic. It just really talks about issues that we have in everyday life, and it does it super, super well. Like, I think May as a character is the most just authentic character. Like, the others are a little bit more scripted because they're not based on real people. I've like wept several times. I have laughed constantly, and I just love it. And I have 2 episodes left. I don't want it to end, but I might just go around and like rewatch it. I was like having a pretty tired morning and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go out. So I walked to Uptown, which is near me, and I went to this new coffee shop. I started reading White Ogre Sea. Love that book, really need to read more. And then I was like, but you know what I need to write. So I took my notebook and I started writing, and I wrote for like 3 hours until the person had to like tap me and be like, hey, we're closing. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, you know what, I'm not done writing. So I just walked down the road and went to another coffee shop that I used to frequent a lot. Why does the best food like never look good? I really, really like Beartown. And I also haven't stopped crying almost through the whole thing. Oh my goodness. I'm only like half an hour from the end. I'm gonna go straight into Me Against You because I just want to read this all and have an emotional breakdown. But Frederick Bachman, I started up roughly feeling because I didn't like A Man Named Ove, but I think I might have misunderstood it. And then I read Anxious People and I cried and I loved that. And then I read this and I'm like, each book just keeps on getting better and better. Us Against You might not have made me cry quite as much, but I definitely lost a lot of tears. I'm gonna have to drink a lot of water to like rehydrate myself, and I just want to go on and watch and read more emotional stuff because that's always what happens. I love emotional books more than anything. I like especially how we look forward so much, how much he delicately and also poignantly deals with emotion, how he uses like motifs to repeat and have greater meaning. I love assemble casts. I love going in between different characters. I love looking at the future and looking like glimpses of who they are and where they become. And I just think Frederick Bachman is like a perfect author for me. I really, really love the way he writes. And yeah, I can't wait for Winners, which comes out in October, hopefully. But I could feel like I could just continue to read more of these because I just enjoy the way that he talks about them. I was like a little bit at the beginning because it deals with a lot of the different characters than the first one does. Like some of the characters that were most highlighted last book are like only mentioned in brief parts here, and yet I got so emotionally connected to the people here, and I love the complexity, the complicatedness of all of the characters that are not perfect, that are not innocent, and yet are really broken. And he does emotions so well. Like I love this series. I love Frederick Bachman's writing. I'm so glad that I have read more of his books in the last year.
You realize too young that racists fail geography, but their epithet and perverted patriotism can still shatter moments of your childhood.
So in the last few days, I finished the Beartown books. I adored them so much. I cried so much. And then I read A Psalm for the Wild Built World by Becky Chambers. This was my very first Becky Chambers, and I really, really liked it. I thought the world building was really interesting and like quiet, but also fun. I liked that it was a lot of a character study and there wasn't really a lot going on. And then we have a robot who didn't fall into like the too human or the too robotic stereotypes. I thought it was very interesting to be like a child or like a sociologist who's just like very intrigued by human things, but isn't like, isn't foolish. One of the things that really struck out for me is, so in this world, robots and like the AIs and stuff like that came to life and they came to consciousness and they were like, we're leaving. And they just pieced out, and they have pieced out for the last like 1,000 years. There's been a lot of generations of robots since, and they were in factories and stuff like that. So there's a point where the main character Dex is trying to like do something and not accepting help from the robot, and the robot is like, well, I won't want you to do this because this will be like making you do something like way back in the while when there was factories. And the robot is like, yeah, but giving me agency is also giving me the agency to help, and I want to help you. And I thought that was just an interesting way on how we sometimes deal with people. Rather than giving people choice, we try to uplift people by doing stuff and like refusing to like, you know what I mean? Like treating someone as a full person isn't just doing stuff for them. It's also like giving them the space to do the things that they want to do. It reminded me of a conversation that I had with one of my friends who has a disability and her disability affects her speech. And, she was giving a presentation to a teacher that is notoriously like terrible. Like I have a speech impediment, and he made me once repeat the word, and then he took bread 7 times because he didn't like my enunciation. Like he just made me do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like 7 times was probably moderate. Like just he would make us repeat our sentences and would like criticize us to the like hilt of like he really wanted us to be really well performers and public speakers. So when like she did it and he didn't really correct her, she was like she came out crying, and I was like, what's wrong? Like I, worked in the cafe, so I saw her kind of like, rush out in her wheelchair, and I was like, what's going on? Like, do you need to talk? And she was like, yeah, he didn't correct me. Like he doesn't treat me like a normal person. Why won't he actually correct me? Like I want to, because like she does motivational speeches about disability and like about faith and overcoming and stuff like that. And she's like, I want him to treat me like a person. I don't want him to not critique me because, I have a disability causes me to slur my words and stuff like that. I want him to critique us just as hard as he critiques everyone else in that class. It's important to, be aware of when we need to help people or give people more space or give people accommodations and stuff like that. But it's also really important to let people have the agency to be treated equally. you know, that can definitely be broken down into harmful ways, but I think it also can be broken down into positive things. And then I am in the middle of Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I'm liking this. So I read Race of the Sun in July and I didn't like it very much, so I'm so happy that Black Sun is working so much more with me. I really like the characters, I really like the dynamics, the writing is really funny, the characters are really funny. Not funny, I don't know, like just great and like moments of humor and just like very well written and like yeah, I just really like the world. It's very immersive and cool and it has a ship captain, it has a priestess, it has a guy whose eyes were carved out by his mother and he can see through crows. So I'm reading Ink Without Borders, which is just a fantastic collection of poetry from refugees and migrants, and I really, really love them. Some of them are duds, but like that's always with poetry. And like even if they're not a style that work for me, they have really important messages, and there's so many that have made me cry, that have made me go. I have like a list of like so many authors. I need to look up their poetry collections, and I'm so sad that poetry is not more accessible from like libraries and stuff. It makes me really frustrated. But I was reading this one and I was like, oh, like, you know what I need to read next? I need to finish this and I need to finish Clap When You Land. I read it last July and I started it and I loved it and I was feeling all the emotions, and then it deals with death and a friend of mine died and I just haven't picked it up since just because it's been too emotional. And I was reading this and I was like, I need to read Elizabeth Acevedo. And I flipped the thing and I finished the poem and it says by Elizabeth Acevedo and I was like, wow, I did not realize that I was reading Elizabeth Acevedo when I was thinking I need to read Elizabeth Acevedo. I think that I've probably read Atlantis by her before. Hello, friends. I was all prepared to film a video, like all fancy, and I was like, I'll try the living room bookshelves, because this is actually mostly my roommate's bookshelves, but you know, we can still film in front of them. And then I was like, wait, I have no room on my phone to film, so maybe I should finish this vlog. So we'll test this out. How do you like my weird background? So I read 9 books so far, and I have a few more on the go that I was hoping to finish, but you know, I have to film other videos, and I'm dressed up, so you know, this is the end. So I finished Beartown, and Us Against You. I really, really enjoyed both of them. They were really well done and just really immersive. I love ensemble pieces that allow us to look around at different places and let us really just get to know the characters and their flaws and, you know, really be able to see the humanity of everyone, even when they're doing despicable things and when they're supporting despicable things. Then I read The Psalm of the Wild Build. This is by Becky Chambers. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really well done and just really quiet and yet also really, I don't know, it asked a lot of questions. Not once, I've never really struggled that much with the idea of death, which is what, you know, we look at a lot here, but I still think it was still interesting to look at how the robots versus the humans consider it and how the robots are better at dealing with their death and their end, even though they don't have to. They, because they're only parts, they could continue to rebuild themselves over and over and over again and live on, but it's a choice they don't make because they don't think that it's the right choice. And I thought that was very interesting. Then we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I really love this. I love the characters. I love the world. I'm really excited to dive in. The next book comes out in, I think, in March or April, and I'm excited to read Trail of Lightning, which is also by Rebecca Roanhorse. I'm just going to read all her series. And then I read How the King of Elfane Learned to Hate Stories, and this deals with spoiler character from the Folk of the Air series. I was very interested in this. I thought that it was going to be like a fairy tales through the framing of that character, and it ended up being something else, which is interesting. And I liked it because it had 3 stories that were told in 3 different ways based on the stories, and that's part of the mythology and the stuff that I've always liked best about Holly Black. And I didn't really love the ones that came after until the very last one because I was just like, I don't really want to, like, I don't know. I did finish Queen of Nothing and I was like, we could definitely have more. Like, I wanted more of the ruling to happen afterwards, and we didn't get that. So yeah, I really hope that Holly Black writes more in this world. Then I have Two Trees Make a Forest, and this is by Jessica J. Lee. She is a geologist, naturalist, someone who studies like climate and nature and flowers and all of that. And her family came from Taiwan, from China. And she talks about the land and she talks about places and their immigration and, you know, her trying to trace not only the like geographical and the way that Taiwan has changed as a country, but also how her grandparents have changed and their stories and all of that. And I thought it was really well done. Like the ability, like I got choked up several times, especially talking about her grandfather as a pilot, as, you know, his time in the war, and her grandmother and their stories really choked me up. I thought the writing could have been more beautiful or like more I don't know, there was something missing. Like, even though I got choked up a lot, it was always because of the content and not because of the way that it was written, which some people prefer that. I always prefer a little bit more beautiful prose. And there was definitely moments in which it was well written, but yeah, I look forward to seeing what she'll write in the future because I think that she could become a really brilliant writer. But for me, there was something a little bit too dry about it. And a lot of people called it boring. And I was like, it's not boring. It isn't the most like, yeah, it isn't written in the same way to intrigue, but it is written very informatively. And I learned about a lot about 20th century history in Taiwan and China and immigration and stuff like that. And it was immigration to Canada as well. And then I had a big surprise, which was Clara and the Sun. And I had read part of Ishiguro's, is that how you pronounce it? Work, The Berry Giant, and I just didn't like it. Although I think I read it maybe up to 4 years, 3 to 4 years ago. And it was just so slow and it was supposed to be a fantasy novel. And I was just like, what is happening in this novel? It is so boring. So I'm very interested to maybe reread that. I'm going to read Never Let Me Go before that, which is his most famous work. And yeah, I liked it. The last part, so there's 6 parts, and the like part 5 and 6 are quite short, but part 4 kind of disappointed me. The naivety of Clara a little bit got on my nerves, but it is definitely a story that is focused on themes and focused on just like feeling the feelings. I don't know, because it's not like completely emotional. Like, it is a little dry in its emotion, but it also is very introspective and very beautiful. And I liked the fact that it doesn't actually give away the answers. So it's set in like a near future where we're not shown how we get there. We're not even shown a lot about the actual world. We know that they have AS, which is artificial friends slash AIs made for children to not be lonely. And we have the thing where like it's not even introduced, the fact that they're like lifted, which is like they have their ability to change their bodies and also their bodies and also their minds. They're more intelligent. But there's also some scenes where it's like, the first scene she's talking to the manager, which I also love. Like, people weren't called, so like when they call them like the child and they're adult, they refer to like the main character human is Josie, and she refers to Josie in third person when she's still talking to them. So she'll be like, yeah, Josie is doing this while talking to Josie. And she'll refer to them as adult and mother, and like, but not mother, like the mother. And I liked that style choice. It made it very unique while also not being like too like tropey in the way that an alien would talk. And because she still has a lot of emotions and she still has sentiments throughout and all of these things. What else was I saying? Oh yeah, so there's a moment where she calls the manager just manager, and manager is like talking to her at the end of the day and all of that stuff, and then it's like, and then she took her head off and then her arms, and I was like, what is happening here? And like, they'll be like, and then she walks into another room at the time and they were like, and these people had their 3 heads over there, and I was like, what? So yeah, I was like, we never got fully explained why their body parts can separate. And I was like, some people were just like, yes, they were intellectually engineered. And I was like, did you miss the part where they said that all their heads were together on their couch when their bodies were over there? Like, people just didn't talk about that. I thought the ending was very interesting. It kind of jumps a little bit forward and is very sad, but again, because we're looking at it through Clara's mind, who isn't able to fully grasp everything that's happening, it doesn't she's not as sad as it is, so it's interesting. I still really liked it. It was a book that I would be intrigued to read again and to read more of his books because I like his style. It's not completely my style, but I definitely appreciate it. And then the last book that I read was Ink Without Borders, and this is just a collection of beautiful poems. I shared one, and I talked about Elizabeth Acevedo, and like, if I was to share every poem that like wowed me, it would be like time. It's definitely a book that I hope to buy in the future and be able to mark and annotate because I think that there's so many powerful worlds. I liked the fact that, we had immigration and refugees from around the world, whether it was South or East Asia, whether it was Africa or the Pacific Islands or lots of Latinx people. I didn't like that they were all to America. I know that America likes to think that it's a little bit of the center of the world. Okay. Like, all of these poems were about people who arrived in America. And I was like, yes, I realized that this has a little bit to do, published in 2019. It has election with the like, immigration bans and stuff like that. But also, like, there's lots of talk about that in Europe, and especially in the UK. There's lots of talk about it in Canada. There's a lot of talk about it in other countries around the world, and immigrants who have gone to, like, non-Western countries as well. And I thought that that would have made the book so many more full than just an American book, because you have all of these people coming from all around the world, but it's still kind of acting a little bit like America is the center of the world. And maybe that's my own gripe as a Canadian, but I'm like, and not even Canada, I just would have liked to see, Australia, lots of people go there. Like, the immigration and refugee experience is so different in every country, so to only have it to say, like, to make it without borders and then have everyone end up in the US. I was just like, Betty, like, no. But I thought they were very beautiful and wonderful, and many of them made me cry. Many of them just, like, you felt them really strongly, and they were really powerfully written. And then I'm also still reading Hybrida by Tina Chang. This is a collection of poetry written to mostly her son. She is Taiwanese, and her son is Black and Taiwanese, and she's writing about what it means for her to be his mother, what it means to be a mother. I am liking it. I think the content is really, really good. It's just, it's it doesn't flow well. Like, sometimes you have poetry like that where it can be really powerful and really potent, and there will be some words. Like, I had this with Ocean Vuitton the other day, and like so many other things where I'm like, I like your poetry. I just don't like your poetry. Like, I like the content of it, but it doesn't work for me on a writing stance. So I'm having that fun. I'm having a little trouble with it. But I'm hoping, some of the poems have been working a little bit more for me as I get into the middle. And then I also started last night, I've been meaning to tell you, and this is a nonfiction kind of like letter written from him to his daughter. And David Shiryandi is a South Asian Black man who lives in Canada, and it's about his experience. It's really powerfully written, but also in a really understated way, and I appreciate that because it captures really well the generational divide between him and his parents, who are both from Trinidadian, who were taken as indentured servants and slaves, respectively, from their countries of origin. And then it also has him talking to his daughter. But one of my favorite things is the ability to uplift his daughter in a really powerful way. Like, he talks about, going to a wedding and seeing her hang out and like dance with all of these Black women, and like how he's so happy that she's like able to, find celebration and safety in her body and be able to, learn how to defend herself and to value herself. And I think that is the part that I'm enjoying most strongly right now, but also investigating the way that Canada and what it means to be a teenage girl in the 21st century, in the 2010s and late 2010s, early 2020s, and what it means to be a man for him when he was growing up, I think in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. I'm not sure exactly how old he is, but he's father age. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that, and I'm enjoying reading it. So I will meet you guys in a vlog some other time. Tell me which is the last book that you read and really, really enjoyed, and I will see you next time.